All right, welcome back, everybody. Today, I have a pretty interesting topic that I think is very important to talk about and something that everyone is probably used to, understands, or has at least experienced if they've been working with artificial intelligence in the last couple of years. And the big term is hallucinations, right? So let me dive in real quick. So, hallucinations in its most basic form is the AI lying to you. The hallucination typically happens because the AI was given some context and maybe it didn't understand something very well, or maybe you fed it some wrong information, even accidentally, or it misunderstood the prompt that you were trying to get at. And so as a result, it goes, indexes, tries to find the best information possible for you, but then it comes back and returns something that is completely incorrect or just straight up wrong, right? And hallucinations are pretty dangerous. I've seen a few articles out there where it'll say something and it's actually completely incorrect and could actually either put a business in jeopardy or even a person's life in danger. So you have to be really careful with these hallucinations and being able to spot them. And so I often tell people, especially people or I guess students that I mentor here at the University of Arkansas, that you really shouldn't be worried about your job as much as I think the internet wants you to think, because AI hallucinates so often. I remember a few months ago, I was at an AI meetup and somebody who uses AI for work but doesn't actually know anything technical around it, so not a developer or programmer or anything like that, they had mentioned how surprised they were with how often it was wrong. And so we know that AI is very good at giving us information and quick information, but I think we fail to recognize just how often it actually does give us incorrect information, and either we don't recognize it or we might accidentally ignore it because we just believe the AI to be right as often as it is. And so there's a couple of examples that I want to give out today and maybe help you understand as to how you might be able to spot them a little bit better in your workflow and see why it's still very important to find people that you trust in getting your things across the finish line. So a couple of weeks ago, I'm working on a project. The project that I'm working on had it so that I created a new file extension for iOS apps. Just at a quick high level, typically on iOS apps, you have an IPA file and a .app file. IPA is typically what's uploaded to what's test flight, which is Apple's beta testing option. .app is really only used for testing on simulators, typically on MacBooks, just to see whatever you could do with it. In this particular scenario, I need to create .app files for the QA team so that they can create end-to-end testing stuff for them, right? They came back and they had mentioned to me that the app extension wasn't working. It wouldn't let users log in. And so they went to Copilot using Visual Studio Code and tried to figure out what exactly might be happening. And they came back to me and said, "Hey, Chris, I think the login isn't letting us log into the app. I think it has to do with these security permissions with TLS. Will you please go back and double check and make sure that this is right? And please implement this so that we can finally test the mobile application." I sat there very confused for a few minutes, mostly because I knew that at a high level, nothing had to do with TLS. Now, TLS is just the way that we track security and ensure that users have the correct authentication to access a certain endpoint or API to retrieve information from a server or database. So I was very confused as to why Copilot might have given that answer. So I sat with it for about a day or two before I finally got the true fix out. But even before then, as I was sitting there, I realized that there's no way that that TLS issue was ever true or relevant, because we knew that the IPA file worked flawlessly. Users could log in, no issues whatsoever. So that led me to think that there had to have been something specific with the .app. Now, to make a long story very short, I did discover that the true issue was something to do with the way the app build was being signed, and we were able to close that out relatively quickly. But it was very interesting that the AI so confidently told this QA person, and that the QA person came to me pretty confidently in suggesting that the fix that I needed to implement was that, and that I would need to spend time working with our API team, that I would need to spend time setting up logs, getting logs from them. Like, when I look at the entire thing that they were trying to ask me to do, it's something that even with artificial intelligence still probably would have taken me 3 or 4 days to finally debug and figure out what might have been going on. Fortunately, that wasn't the case, and the entire situation just came down to being a signing issue. And so a quick signing issue allowed me to fix it in what, 10 seconds, and we were able to get the application out and running again, and QA was totally fine. But I think that's one really good example of when having someone who understands the technology behind it truly knows what to do. I can't imagine what would have happened if that QA person didn't have a developer who understood these types of things and just kind of went with it and rolled with it and just kept prompting it. Imagine the amount of time that would have been lost in that person's day trying to debug something that wasn't even necessary. I see it playing in this scenario. I could see the QA saying, "Okay, well, thank you, Copilot, for telling me that it's a TLS issue. Please give me my next steps." And then they probably would have said, "Oh, you also have access to the API code, so why don't you go ahead and make the API fix for yourself?" And then it would have come back and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that you already had permissions." I don't know what to do next. Or it probably would have given it another hallucination, and then it would have been nothing to do with the actual mobile application, because it probably would have been stuck on that first idea of it being an API issue, that it would have just kind of ran with that and kind of kept going for a long time. And that's something else to kind of note with these hallucinations, is that once it believes an idea and it believes that that idea is the correct idea that it needs to fix, it will stay fixated on that until it runs out of solutions. And that's why it's very important to keep understanding your prompts and how you're going to get more information to it. I feel, or I guess I find that as you give it more information, or as you give it this opportunity to think a little bit more around that idea, it starts to kind of branch out to these sub ideas until it finally finds a better thought and says, "Oh, maybe it wasn't actually this idea ever. It was maybe something over here." And then eventually it kind of just closes in on whatever the main idea is, and then finally finds your solution, right? So that's story number one. Story number two, I'm working right now on implementing a newsletter option into the Cam Software LLC website. And so I was working with implementing a product called Resend. It might be familiar to some people, not to others. In its entirety, Resend just allows me to take in a user's email address, and I can save it, and then I can immediately send out the email blast in one go to all these people, right? Very similar. I mean, if you've ever used stuff like Loops or Mail, I think it was MailChimp or MailerLite, like it's very similar stuff, right? So it's not anything new. However, when I was implementing the product, the AI kept asking me for a specific ID. And maybe at one point in its past, in the documentation, it did require this ID. I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt in that scenario. But when I went looking through the documentation, I never saw anything about an additional ID in any scenario. And so I had gone in and I did it manually. I said, this is what the AP or the documentation is saying, so therefore I should implement it in this way. Please add it for me. I've added it, no big deal. I then went to go test it and it didn't work. And I asked the AI and I said, "Hey, sorry, this isn't working. Can you please help me find or debug where this issue might be happening so that I can finally implement this correctly?" And for some reason, it kind of like went back to its original thought, right? So like we look at the way it went. It started off with, "You need this ID." Okay, you've given me information that I don't need an ID. Hey, you need an ID. And so I went back and I said, "Here's the actual information. Here's all the documentation necessary surrounding this. There's no way we need an ID. If you can prove to me that we need an ID, we will implement an ID right now and I will go look for it. But if there's no way that you can find that we truly need that ID, then I need you to implement it in this way and stop telling me that I need an ID." And it came back and said, "Yes, you're right. I've looked through the documentation. I looked through everywhere in this website, and you're right. I have yet to find a place that requires me to have the specific ID. So I'm not going to implement it. I'm going to just use whatever I found in this documentation, and I'm going to go ahead and implement it directly and correctly." And so that highlights another like very big point that I think a lot of us are making, or I guess a big mistake that a lot of us are still making. And the big point being that we trust this AI and we believe it to be 100% true, but it didn't take me very long to go into the documentation and look at it myself from a non-technical perspective, right? Even you could take this from like a healthcare perspective, from writing perspective, from data processing or Excel or whatever it may be. But it doesn't take very long for most of us to go in and verify that some of these things might not be correct. And so as a professional software engineer, I can go in and easily recognize when some of these things might be wrong, and I can go online and say, "This doesn't look right." Or if it's a really quick thing that most of the time for my work, I'll typically have my coding editor open and I'll have, Google Chrome open and I'll be researching things alongside it. So it's really easy for me to kind of see, hey, this is what I'm seeing here on the internet, on my browser, but the AI is saying something different. So like, can I please find a way to put these two together and find out which one is the actual source of truth. And we could do that too in just our every day-to-day life with anything else that we might be working with it, whether it's a PDF or something maybe made on Figma, or just general word processing when we're looking for something on a document, or maybe we're writing the document and so it hallucinated something or wrote something that's not correct. And so it really pushes us to point that we need to not only safeguard ourselves against AI, but we need to be finding ourselves, and we need to find the correct people to help us in making sure that those safeguards are placed correctly. So take it from this perspective, right? As a software developer and as a business owner, it's very easy for me to say, hey, do this thing for me while I go work on this other thing, right? And so I've had many times where the AI will come back and I'll be working on something business related and it'll give me all this information and I'll read it over and I think, oh, this looks good. And then I'll go talk to somebody else about it who truly understands business, either being an accountant, a lawyer, or whomever. And they immediately come back and say, hey, this AI hallucinated for you for this specific reason. And then I'll go back, reprompt it, try to figure out why either it hallucinated or why I came up with that information so that I can figure out how I can prompt it better in the future. And that is why, like I said at the very beginning, I believe that so many jobs are still safe going forward with AI. Now, does that mean that there isn't going to be displacement? Of course, there's going to be some displacement. We've already seen the effects of it today. Like, it's going to become a bigger deal in the future. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, and I'm hoping that people stop being so afraid of it, is it still hallucinates and lies to you quite often. Enough so that if you're trusting it for everything, I would caution you to be very wary of how you're using it and maybe take a step back with some of these things, or start learning how to ask it questions to verify that what it's telling you is true. And I can't tell you at this point how exactly you can go about that. I have my own tips and tricks that I might be able to share in the future. But for the most part, it's just a learning process you kind of have to go through with how you work every day and what your workflows are. And so I guess in all, what I'm trying to say is, as you progress in whatever work you're doing, whether it's you're using it for a business or whether you're using it to build out some sort of small web app for your business, you always are going to have to require some sort of professional behind the scenes or after the scenes to make sure that the AI isn't lying to you and isn't doing anything correctly. Recently, and if I can find it, I'll try to link it, there was an article that came out that this AI company I guess this company used AI to create their entire website and their entire platform, only to find out that they were never HIPAA compliant, which is a huge deal, by the way, especially in this country, in the US. And they came out and said that they were 100% HIPAA compliant, and we ended up finding out recently that they weren't. It goes to show you that, like, if you're just kind of going out there and assuming that people understand what they're doing or that they're going to learn along the way because AI is just a great tool to help you learn, yes, part of that is true. But if you don't give them those resources to truly understand what they're getting through, like, you're still going to fall into the pitfalls of just not having having someone that doesn't really understand the problem or the technology to begin with. And that is probably the biggest point that I want to make today, that you really can't go and use AI and replace everybody. I think today, if you're a solopreneur or an entrepreneur, or maybe you're a very small company and you need these tools to kind of help you move fast, great. I still encourage you. I don't want this to be like a doom and gloom, like don't use AI, or like use AI and use it responsibly, but make sure that you're using it in a way, or having people that are there that can truly know what's going on, and that you're not going to accidentally run into problems or errors in the future. The last thing you want for your business to have to happen is that you've created this awesome project, this awesome website, or this awesome app, or you've created this new specific internal use web application for you, but then because of compliance and rules and all these other things, and maybe it's security, maybe it's like cybersecurity stuff, maybe it's scaling, whatever the case may be, because you didn't consider those things at the very beginning, now you're going to be stuck with a problem that AI didn't prepare you for. AI is going to do a really good job of giving you what you need based off of your prompt. It's not doing a really good job of helping you understand these larger things like scaling and architecture and system designs, especially coming from a technical background. Like, I can tell you, it doesn't do that for you day one unless you really know how to prompt it correctly to do so. So please be cautious. Please understand that AI does hallucinate. AI still does tell you the truth. It does do a lot of good, and it does return a lot of really good and valuable information. But please be cautious with it and make sure that you're having the correct people alongside you to give you that information or to ensure that the information that's being provided to you by the AI is correct and isn't going to lead you down a path that will accidentally create problems for you down the future.